Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joanne Rabati. Thanks so much for joining us today for this discussion of the podcast Out of Print, the Unmaking of Community News, which is an in-depth look at the vital role that community newspapers play in towns such as Shelter Island. We have four panelists with us today. Ambrose Clancy, who will be joining us, we hope, very shortly, who is the editor of the Shelter Island Reporter and has been so since 2012, which is like a lifetime for the Reporter. He's the author of the recently published collection of his journalism for national newspapers and magazines entitled My Life in Pieces, Writers, Rogues, the Road, and the Rock. He's also the author of Nightline, a memoir of work, and the novel Blind Pilot. In 2023, Ambrose received top honors from the National Newspaper Association for his columns and feature writing. Susan Carey Dempsey, raise your hand, joined the Reporter in 2018 as community news editor and podcaster. Previously, she was a correspondent for the New York Times, a staff writer for the Bucks County Courier-Times, a freelance writer who's been published in Newsday, Women's Day, the New York Post, and many other publications. When she was a radio producer and writer, she was the recipient of the Best Environmental Reporting Award for radio from the Long Island Press Club. Sara Verwymeren, sorry, I'm not going to pronounce your name correctly, was literally born on Mark Street and raised on Shelter Island. She's a 2000 graduate from Shelter Island High School and spent many years working in the hospitality industry and traveling the world. In between, she worked at the Reporter from 2005 to 2007, writing profiles and features. She now owns Three Pines Organizing in Winnipeg, Canada, where she lives with her husband and three children. And Jake Williams comes from a family with deep roots on Shelter Island. He received an MA in journalism from the University of Missouri and worked at the Reporter/Times Review from 2007 to 2011 as a reporter, a sports editor, and a photographer. Published more than 1,000 articles during that time, including news stories, editorials, commentary columns, and personal essays. During his stint at the Reporter, he also learned what it meant to be a public figure as a journalist on our little community. He went on to work for CBS Sports, first as a writer and NFL researcher, then as a news producer for news coverage for all of CBS Sports properties. For the past 6 years, he's been a freelance podcast producer and creator, covering a very wide variety of topics. His latest effort, which he started in 2024, is what brings us here today. He is the creator, the host, and executive producer of Out of Print, the Unmaking of American News. Jake, tell us briefly what Out of Print is all about and what prompted you to spend so much time on this project.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone who's joined us this afternoon. Um, I'd say the podcast series is a love letter to local news and an exploration of why local newspapers are struggling and why we see so many of them going out of business entirely. And I started this when in 2024 when the Reporter was looked like it would be shut down if it wasn't sold. And I wanted to understand how the Reporter went from being the thriving business that it was when I started working there in 2007 to reaching that point. And I thought it was particularly important to understand an environment where local newspapers are closing across the country. It's not just something that's happening in one particular location. Unfortunately, this is a trend that we're seeing of local newspapers closing across the nation. And I want to explore and explain what happens when people lose access to professional source of local news. And so, what I want to explore in particular about using the Shelter Island Reporter as an example, and I think these stories are universal across the states. How do the paper and community it covers reflect each other? What does a local paper mean to its readers? What would change if there were no paper? And how do we create a present and future where the paper remains a vital and viable part of the community?
So, what were the most pivotal or crucial things that emerged from this immersion into the reporter's life and times?
Um, I think first off is just the changing media landscape in which we live in, where as Andrew Olson, the Reporter's publisher, told me, it used to be that the Reporter's biggest competitors were other newspapers. And now it's Meta, it's Google, it's these tech companies that have taken eyeballs, taken advertising, and just entirely changed the way in which we get, receive, and expect our news to come. The second, I didn't, which I learned so much about going in, but didn't realize how important it was how much Shelter Island itself has changed. Demographically, the businesses that are there, the ecosystem, I mean, you name it, things have changed significantly in the last 20 years, and it's created a much different audience for the paper. And I didn't realize how much those were intertwined until I started talking to people and really looking into what's changed and how much and why.
Thank you. Susan, you also worked for a small paper in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Is that paper still publishing, and how is it the same or different from the Shelter Island Reporter?
I'm almost positive they're still publishing, although we moved away 5 or 6 years ago. But that was a daily. That was a daily paper, and again, it had sister papers. It's rare for one to be standalone. Um, but it was a lot bigger, obviously, than Shelter Island's 2,000 person community supports. Um, but a lot of it is the same. It's if people want to know about their local school and their local teams and their police department, um, and to also reflect the character of the community because there is a very a distinct profile of that community, just as Shelter Island has.
Okay. So Ambrose, you're going to be masquerading as Sarah Garcia, I understand. You've been in this game for the community news game for quite a while. How have you seen community news change, and have there been any changes for the better? No, we're not getting him.
Mm.
Okay, hopefully he'll join us at another time. Sarah, you brought a very unique background to your.
Joanne,
Oh, sorry.
I am able to answer for Ambrose, but it's just
Okay.
a little hard. There's a bit of a delay, so give me one
Okay.
quick second.
Sure.
Okay. So Ambrose has said that one of the biggest issues that he's seen is the economic change, and lowering subscription rates of in-print newspapers has also been a struggle.
Okay. Thank you. Sarah, you brought a very unique background to your job at the Reporter. You were, as you said, literally born here. You were educated here. Your parents were and still are fixtures in the community. How did that hair leg or heritage, if you will, help or hinder your work when you were at the Reporter?
Can you hear me okay, Joanne? Just
Yeah, I
wanted to
can.
check that.
Perfect.
Okay, great. I've got 3 kids home today, so anybody could burst through the door at any moment.
And a dog, I'm sure.
And a dog, yeah. So I mean, it was such a privilege to work for, the Reporter was this staple in our household growing up. So my grandmother she worked at the North Ferry Company for 40 years. And so every time we were at her house, the Reporter was on the table. And so even if my parents didn't necessarily get it growing up, it was just sort of like these stories and these local celebrities you just sort of got to know through this small print newspaper. Um, and even now, our kids visit Shelter Island, and the first thing that they do is they go to the Reporter and they go to the police blotter because they want to see what raccoons have done to the local community. So like there is nothing like it. Now we live in a million people city, and so you're not going to see that kind of stuff in the newspaper. So I feel like I had a very sort of privileged view, because a lot of the people that I was either sent to write for or go interview, I already had a history and an understanding. So they're like, "Oh, you're Tom and Lisa's daughter," and so that already gave me this sense of they're comfortable with me in their homes. Whereas when you get a reporter from, who knows where, asking you a bunch of personal questions, they're not going to maybe divulge as much information. So I had almost this like shoe-in opportunity. That being said, it was harder when they saw me because everybody recognized me. So when I had to do really uncomfortable pieces like going on the street and asking people what the weather was, like it was such a mild question. But that alone, people are like, no, no, don't talk to me. Like I saw you and I
Jake
don't
said
want
the
to talk
same
to
thing.
you.
Right.
Yeah. So I think there was a lot of that too. Like if they, which was a big deal for me writing profiles of local celebrities. Like if this doesn't go well, it's not just like I can run away. Like this is my hometown. So there's a little bit more pressure.
But you told me a very charming anecdote where you wrote a profile of, you said a local hero. You couldn't remember who it was. I believe it might have been Walter Ogar, because what did he do? He was so thrilled with the profile. What did he do when you got married?
Yeah, so I had written for him when I was engaged, and then he offered to drive me to my wedding ceremony in his Model T Ford, um, because he was so happy with the piece, and so and so after that I was like, oh gosh, okay, like maybe this is gonna go really well. My parents would know who it is, but yeah, that was really sweet because of course like there's a connection to all of these people. And actually, I started interviewing people when I was in sixth grade. We had the Behringers live behind us, and that was one of my school projects. I had to interview and learn all the history of Shelter Island. So it was kind of natural for me to just ask questions. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. So, Jake, a number of times in your podcast, you say that the Shelter Island Reporter is more than a newspaper. It's what holds Shelter, what makes Shelter Island Shelter Island. It's the connective tissue that holds the community together. I think, Sara, you just addressed that a little bit. Susan, Jake, Ambrose, can you comment on that?
Sure.
I'll jump in. I'll
Oh, go
jump
ahead.
in just to say that the reaction that Jake captured this beautifully. The immediate reaction was how we couldn't have Shelter Island without the reporter. It was like when we almost lost the fireworks. It would be like not having the Memorial Day parade. A real institution. And as you say, people have their opinions, not always happy because you touch on facts and you touch on controversy, but it's really such a part of Shelter Island that it's not just a newspaper. It's a character. It's one of our characters here on the island.
Jake?
I think that's a really good way to put it. Has become one of the like starring characters of Shelter Island. It's the community forum where we like see everyone's opinions of what's going on the island. Um, it is when we did on the street, the person that everyone ran away from. I mean, in theory, the idea of of asking three people a simple question, getting their names and photos, it should take maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and it was just a struggle. And I will say there was one time I don't know how long I spent out on Bridge Street trying to get a third person to answer the question. Finally, someone does, and it's like she gave me her first name but not her last name. And I was like, you know what? I'll see if I can make this work. It's much easier for me to try to figure that out than wait for another person because everyone loves seeing their names, their pictures in the paper, except for on the street. So I went back and does anyone know who this is? And our copy editor, bless him, it's like, oh, sure, I know who that is. And it's like, oh, there you go. It was something where between all of us at the paper, we knew who pretty much everyone on the island was, and they, for better or worse, knew who we were. And it was at times a lot of fun. But it was, and we represented the community, and there was something when I was talking to my former editor, Kara Lores, about, why we had the bowling columns in the paper. And I remember telling someone about this who never, I don't think has ever been to Shelter Island. I thought it was like that just blew his mind that we would have this column. And Kara said, well, it's like, that shows what's happening on the island and what's going on. There are only so many things going on in the middle of winter on Shelter Island.
Yes. I have to say that in listening to the podcast, and I went through it twice, there were a couple of things. One, of course, the car chase story just, is hilarious. But the Storm Sandy, down at this South Ferry, Cliff Clark, and the person they had to evacuate, Ted Hill's story on the last varsity basketball game of the season. I mean, these things literally, I brought tears to my eyes. I mean, I remember reading them originally, but it was really wonderful to come back to them again. And as you've all said, these are the things that really hold us together and that make us realize why we love living here and what makes this community so unique. Something obviously that would be lost without it. So one of the really alarming things you bring out, Jake, is the effect on communities once they lose an independent, trusted news source and are relying on social media, gossip, word of mouth. Can you talk to that a little bit? I think that one of your professors talks about some communities that really ran amok after the loss of their local papers.
Yeah, I so I think one of the professors I talked to, who's now a journalism professor at the University of Missouri when I went to school, for his PhD program, he went down to the city of Bowling Green in Virginia, where they had just lost their paper, I think maybe the year before. And he went and interviewed a bunch of people to ask like what's changed. And they talked about missing events. It would be like the Shelter Island equivalent would be the 10K or the fireworks, and missing out on that event because you didn't see it in the paper and it slipped your mind that this was the date it was going to happen. They said that it was a lot harder to figure out what was going on. So if you wanted to understand what was happening at the town or county board, you'd have to go yourself. And if you missed more than a meeting or two, you'd completely lose the train of what was happening. And they said that it was like the heart and soul of the community had been ripped out. And then there's also the fact that the newspaper serves as the shared history and shared source of information. And if you're getting information or news word of mouth, the pace at which it goes is variable. Um, like as kids, we probably all played the game telephone. By the time whatever was started with, when you get to the end, it's nothing close to what it was at the beginning. And it's difficult. There's no arbiter or mediator of what's being posted. And we all know that these social media companies, the algorithms are set up to stir your emotions more than and continue to have you engage more than anything else. And so what is or isn't fact is becomes beside the point.
Sarah, you had a comment from Ambrose. Can you read it out?
Yes, I can. Ambrose wanted to add that the reporter is really the connective tissue within the community. And he was amazed when he took the job 14 years ago at how close the community really is to the reporter. And he said that the reporter like very clearly belongs to the community. And he did say that it can get you in trouble sometimes when you're reporting. But he said it's an extremely rewarding experience.
Thanks. So I think all of you except for Sara, except for Susan, worked at the Reporter when there was an office. I worked there under Peter Booty when the office was still on 114 across from the pizza place. And I remember that people would stop by with their photos. This was before big digital transfer of things, handwritten letters or articles. Peter Waldner would drop off his weekly cartoons. And there was always a lot of jawboning, not just among the staff, but among community members about what was going down the street, going on at Justice Hall, the cop shop, or town hall. So the office closed in 2019. And according to publisher Andrew Olson, this trimming of expenses allowed the paper to withstand the challenges of the pandemic and keep it operating. So question for Ambrose, and I realize there might be a delay. How do you think coverage of the town has changed since the office has closed? And what do you miss about being on 114 every day? And Jake, I'm going to ask you the same question while Ambrose is, we're getting Ambrose's relay of an answer. How do you think reporting has changed? And is there a sense in the paper's coverage of some kind of sense of semi-isolation?
The impression I got from talking to people is that the paper feels more removed. And I remember being in the office, people would be coming in and out every day, and there was, if nothing else, that you knew that if you wanted to go talk to someone at the paper, you knew exactly where you could find them. Whether it was coming into drop off a letter, from someone dropping off a column, a photo, to go place an ad. Like we were always there. Someone was always there, and I think knowing that and knowing that you would see us and that we lived in the community made us seem more a part of the place than if it were. Speaking for myself, my aunt is the current town supervisor, and we've had a place on Baldwin since the 50s. If my grandfather hadn't bought that place, I would never have been able to live there. And it would have been a lot more difficult to cover the community and to be accepted as part of it, as working for the Reporter.
Sara, can you read Ambrose's response, please?
Absolutely. He said the coverage has suffered enormously without having an office on the island. It was a walk-in office. So people would go to the post office or anywhere in the center, then they'd stop by the reporter, come in with tips, suggestions, or sometimes to rave at us or tell us we were doing a good job. A lot of times they would come in to hang out. And he said we've lost that connection and that value to the community and our readers with that loss of the office.
Thank you. Sara, what was your experience? Because you were there when there was an office also.
Yeah, I mean, it was so, I think because of the way of the layout of the office, which people are recognizing now that they're going back to work, there's a kind of camaraderie that I think you, as an employee, can't really experience when you're not in the room with people. So I would hear Kara on the phone, and most of the time she was dodging calls of people who were coming to complain about something that was written or something that they thought was like, this has got to be priority in the paper. And so she would hang up the phone. And so naturally, as a workplace, you're kind of like, are you all right over there? Like, can we help? And so like that gets lost too in the digital world. And I think now people, you can hide behind your computer and you can hide behind comments and all that kind of stuff. Whereas when you come into an office and you see your friend's face that works for the newspaper, you're like, I want to complain about that. And there's just a little bit more humanity involved. And so we're seeing that with our kids' generation, like they don't experience that, right? They can read and digest their news without ever taking a risk of actually talking to that person. So um, I thought it was, yeah, I don't think I would have enjoyed it at all. I'm such a sort of social person. I don't think I would have worked from home very well had I been a part of it without the office. And the advertising guy, he was right next door, and I just remember just cackling at like the things that would come in that people were trying to advertise, or like just that element alone felt like, again, just this level of humanity that you can't get when you're not together.
So thank you. Susan, you were the only person who didn't have
I
the luxury, if you
no,
will.
no, I did. I did. So
Okay.
I do want to jump in because it really was so sad for me too, because I was working there when it closed. And I can remember specific people like Richard Lemusio would come in, and we were so sad to lose him a few years ago. He'd come in, and I know it was to have an intellectual banter with Ambrose. He would have a subject, but it was really, he just really enjoyed the company of someone he respected. We had people who would come in, they'd say, well, I want to put something in the paper. It's because someone died in my family. It wasn't an obituary so much as maybe a follow-up note, but they had that human connection, as you were all saying. They came in, they spoke to a person that knew the island. And sometimes people would come in, they'd have an issue, and Ambrose would take them into a side office, just talk it through with respect. Everybody came out, a little bit closer to understanding the other person's viewpoint. It was really it was a lovely office. It was a perfect location. And that walk-in was something that it was really a shame to lose.
So do you think, all of you and Ambrose included, that the loss of the office impacted residents' view of the reporter?
I would
And do
say.
you also think it's still possible to get the true flavor of events without feet on the ground, so to speak?
I'd say it's harder, but we've got our amazing tiny staff that gets out there into the community. It would be preferable, dollars and cents wise, it's not there, but would be preferable to have a physical location on the island. Um, we've got the amazing Julie Lane, who goes to meetings and covers every one of them, and Ambrose gets around all over the island. I'm on the island, at least in the, warmer months. And we've got our amazing sports writer, Jackson Rohrer, who I hope we'll talk about later. So, we've got the man and woman power, but we don't have the physical presence, and that was a loss.
So how do you think that the loss of the office did impact the way people viewed the paper?
You want me to answer?
And
Everybody?
everybody.
Yeah, I think there's always been that sort of I'm not going to be sure that I trust you, but it was a lot better if they could come in the office and see a person's face and speak to a human. The whole idea of living on an island is it's a moat, and that's our nature. It's not Mattatuck. It's not even Greenport. It's Shelter Island.
Sarah, you want to read Ambrose's comment, please?
He said, yes, I think people at first, and still some people will say in so many words, why should I even listen to you? You're not even here or connected to the island. But by and large, I think people have come around and have respect for our paper. We work extra hard to make our connection to the community as strong as possible. But yes, there are some people and always will be some who reject us because we're not there, but we work very hard to keep that connection solid.
Great, thank you. Okay, so in the summer of 2024, the Times Review announced that the Shelter Island Reporter was up for sale. And if unsuccessful, it may eventually be folded into another Times Review paper. There was a big meeting called very hastily here at the library. I don't think until that meeting was actually announced that many people knew what was going on. Ambrose, via delay, what led up to that decision in the meeting? And Susan, what did the staff do at that point? What actions did you all take? How did you think about you might be able to save the paper?
Well, just speaking for myself, what Jake reported on was that we were lucky that Duff Wilson was in the small group of us that were first heard from Ambrose what was coming up, and that meeting was organized, and then groups of people went to subsequent meetings. One of them was at my house, and I think it was important for us to be able to hear from people on the island what they were saying, and bring it back either to Andrew or to Duff, to try to get to try to find an answer. Um, we had the idea that the only thing that might survive was an insert in the Suffolk Times, and I couldn't tell you anybody on Shelter Island who would have bought that. And that's just for sure. And yes, we all had, friends at other papers. We heard from people who were interested in the reporter, but Jake knows more about the finances and how far that might have gone. I think what is really amazing, I think it all goes back to that one meeting at the library. I was impressed that Andrew came. I think he obviously didn't have the answers that satisfied people, but I think he was impressed with what the island did to turn out and to talk about how valuable the paper is to them. And he still talks about that.
Oh, that's encouraging. Jake, do you think the reaction of the community was typical in terms of other papers, community papers that you looked at in the course of your research? Or do other papers kind of fade away without a whimper? Or do people rally around to try to save them?
It's a good question. From what I've seen, I think that there are a few factors involved. I think one, a paper that's owned by a larger conglomerate, there's really no sentimentality to that decision. Like if it's losing money, if it's not profitable, it's gonna get they're gonna close it, and that's it's a decision based, I think, more on business than anything else. Some places it's the people running the paper want desperately to keep it in business. And maybe it's time that they want to retire and no one wants to buy the paper, or the economics of it that's to make it no longer feasible for them to keep running it. And it's just a matter of like, I can't afford to keep doing this, and the paper closes, and that's also, I think, tragic. Here, I think we had an enormous community turnout of people who wanted very much for the paper to survive and to keep going, and an owner who was willing to come listen, to come explain, and to put himself out there and answer people's questions, and who saw for himself how much, I think, if I understood correctly, how much the paper meant, how much people wanted it, and that it was that if he could do it, it would be worthwhile to continue publishing the reporter.
Great. And Sarah, we have a comment from Ambrose.
He said, I think the meeting was called because we really had to do it. There were so many questions from the community about why the paper would be leaving the scene. To his credit, Andrew took every question at the meeting. It was incredibly well attended. Before the meeting, there were moves afoot to try to save the reporter. Duff Wilson, a Shelter Islander and great national reporter, was trying to find ways to make the reporter a nonprofit and have it not be sold. There are some newspapers around that have that, and he worked really hard at it. I think the community response, which was truly overwhelming to save our/their newspaper, really had an impact on all of us and the publisher. And that's why we're continuing and have made the commitment to keep publishing. And that was Andrew's commitment.
Great. So how did your Susan and Ambrose, do you think your relationship or interaction with the community changed at all after that announcement on the meeting? Did you see was there a bump in advertising revenue or subscriptions? What changed that, besides the touchy-feely, wonderful feeling that Andrew got from the meeting, that allowed him to make the decision to keep going?
Well, I personally definitely heard from people who were very concerned and wanted to know how they could help, or is there an alternative? Where are we going from here? I think I'm trying to read what Ambrose is saying, but I do think it's a small island. There aren't that many businesses, but there were a lot of conversations about how could we generate more advertising dollars. Has everybody subscribed? Who could do that? And it was very, very, very grassroots. Because we're all in the community. We're talking to people who everybody has their own favorite piece of the paper, but the thought of not having it at all just was just impossible for people to accept. So, I remember Ambrose, I think, came and spoke to people at the Chamber of Commerce. There was a sense of, maybe we can't buy the paper, but maybe we can do a little bit more, with a little bit more help. So that's the response we were getting.
Sara, comment from Ambrose about Susan's role here?
Yeah, he wanted to say that Susan Dempsey was really instrumental to saving the paper. She hosted meetings at her place and was really a true hero for the paper.
Thank you, Susan. Jake, you were part of the group with Duff Wilson that explored buying the paper and possibly running as a nonprofit. What can you tell us about that?
It was, I think we were all united in that we didn't want Shelter Island not to have its own local newspaper. And so we as a group were looking to um, figure out what could we do? Uh, what could we do to keep the reporter going, or if need be, create something new entirely? And I think part of the what we quickly came to was the costs associated with running and operating a newspaper. We're not going to be able to cover them with our own money and strictly from advertising. And so we had to look at what other revenue sources might be available. And it seemed to us that the most obvious one to turn to would be to make it a nonprofit so that people could donate, and that really seemed to be the only way that we could conceive of in a community place like Shelter Island, with a limited readership, that where we could, financially speaking, make ends meet on publishing a newspaper.
How are nonprofit papers faring in communities that have gone that route?
Um, It seems that some of them are faring pretty well. There was one that we looked at, I believe in Salt Lake City, that was faring tremendously well. I think it had uh, is back on solid footing, and I think it's really in a place, I think, where people are willing to put the money in. It does well. If But it's not a cure-all. It's, I think, very circumstantially and situation, maybe even geographically dependent on who is going to support the paper and for how long. And a nonprofit certainly isn't a panacea. The paper has to be able to do other things in order to keep, I think, enough of a revenue stream coming in order to operate.
And what has the reporter been doing to bolster those revenue streams? Susan? Ambrose?
Well, it might take a while for Ambrose to answer.
Okay.
One thing I did want to mention, I keep muting because we have a lot of sirens around us. But the forums that were started, I don't know how much, but I do know they get some sponsorship dollars in, and they've been really successful in terms of turnout. Um, just Ambrose and Charity Roby, they pick topics. We've obviously got experts to talk about these issues like water and affordability. And we get a tremendous response. I think, and it's good that Andrew Olson does come to them. He does see their importance to the community. So that's one thing. I think we're probably going to always keep looking for ideas. How can we, bolster uh, bolster the bottom line? And I think we're open to anything, merch, whatever.
I noticed in the ad this week for the next forum on the future of healthcare, there are two things that I was struck. First of all, Stony Brook and Suffolk Security Systems were sponsors, which is great. And also the little tagline underneath the reporter logo that says, doing even more to keep our connection to the community we serve solid and engaged, which is a really nice mission statement, if you will, with these. So all of you, what would life be like on Shelter Island without the reporter? Sara? I mean, you said when you come to visit in the summer, your kids go rushing for the police blotter.
Yeah.
Besides that,
Yeah.
what would it be like?
Are you saying without
Yeah,
it?
without the reporter.
Yeah, I like what someone said before about it being a character, and I think that's how now being removed for 11 months out of the year, and we spend a month during August every year, and so we only see this small snapshot. But obviously, I have family on the island. My brother is there, and his kids, and my parents, and my cousins, and so I think we understand that it's not all fairy tale small town charm, but that's what my kids and my family experiences when they come. It almost feels magical. And so the reporter in this local news, and my kids made it into the reporter. They were dancing one night at one of the barbecues at the Pridwin, and the next day they were like rushing for the reporter because they had seen that the photographer was there. And so like there is this, they can't get that anywhere else in the world. Like you just can't experience that. Um, so there is this, I think, almost this hope when you have this kind of life. It shows my kids that like the rest of the world looks like it's chaos, but Shelter Island's going to be fine. Like that's how they think. And the reporter makes so much of that. Again, it just adds to the charm of the place.
It's
So
great.
it would be a huge, huge loss. They've really actually kind of been grieving the loss of the things that they've lost recently, like Jack's and the pharmacy, and those have been also characters of the community for a long time. That even my kids who don't, they're only there for 1 month, they're kind of like, wait, what's happening to the foundations of this place that was so safe, I think, and are realizing that maybe not everything is as safe and as trusted as it was, you know.
Nice. Jake, what would life be like without the reporter?
Oh, I don't know how to follow what Sarah just said. I think life would be a lot different. You know, it's and there's we wouldn't see, the high school sports coverage that we do. Um, there wouldn't be those same profiles about, the people in the community. I think that there's just such a connection that we get to the community and reading those, that if the reporter weren't there to do it, I don't think anyone else would. I think it would increase. I mean, Shelter Island is already fairly removed from even the rest of Long Island. Um, I remember um, when I worked at the Reporter, News 12 did a story on the girls' high school basketball team. and they rode with them on a bus trip to Smithtown Christian for a game. And when the piece came out, the first line of it was about the ferry and the distance and the time it took to get from Shelter Island to Smithtown. And um, it would be impossible. And what I wrote is that it looks like even the rest of Long Island views Shelter Island as something of a novelty. You just wouldn't um, it would just, we would be getting, Shelter Island would be getting news about themselves from an outsider's perspective. And I think that would be tremendously difficult to, to trust that kind of coverage and to want to be helpful to it. I
Mhm.
think it would be, a tragic loss if if the reporter wasn't there.
Susan, what would life be like without the reporter? I have to figure out how to turn the lights back on in here.
Okay. Well, from my inside point of view, first of all, I do the police blotter, so I know that that is first thing everybody turns to, and it's truly important. But I also do the around the island section, and I feel that we have a commitment to organizations on the island who wouldn't be able to do a lot of advertising. And I really take it seriously that every week I try to advance what's coming up at the library, at the History Museum, Sylvester Manor, what the Lions are doing, even the Garden Club. We have such wonderful artists in the community, and they do the artsy tour in the summer. So, every chance that we can, I find it more important to advance those than even to cover them, because if I just do a good job and we get the people out, we'll get a good picture at the event, but we got to get the turnout. So I think there is such a rich um, tapestry or complexion of a community that would be so dispersed if we didn't have this one place everyone could come and see, well, what's going on this week and what's coming on next week, and who are, as Jake pointed out, those wonderful people that we profile. Really, the amazing stories. We have such a rich constituency of people. So yes, we would exchange messages maybe on Shelter Island Local or some of the funkier other sites, but this is still the one trusted source I think people do cherish.
Sarah, you had a comment or two from
Yeah, I
Ambrose?
did. I just wanted to, are you talking to me,
Oh, no,
Sarah, or
go ahead.
Sarah
Oh, I'm
Garcia?
sorry. I was talking the other, but that's okay. So
Okay, do you want her to go?
no, I want you to go.
Okay. Um, I think something that we talk about a lot in sort of our phase of life is that, for our kids, we aren't meant to absorb this much information. There's so much coming at them, and what it does is when you're so concerned or feel like you're supposed to be in the know about every little thing, what happens is it takes you away from your local community. And so when we lose local news and people who are on the ground and living in the place, you lose this connection to your community, not just in a physical way, but in a also, like, I'm so distracted by what's happening in other places of the world. I can't even get out to the parade today because I'm so overwhelmed. So I think that it's almost like this protective little um, piece of a small town that makes you feel like at least everything here is okay, or we can actually get through this together, or we can put an ad in and we can do a fundraiser. And it's like you have this group that you can sort of put a call out to, whereas when you are feeling sort of that overwhelm and alone in a bigger place, it's like you can put your voice into the void, and who's going to call back? And that's where Shelter Island community is so incredible, is that they respond, and that's where you get the chance to put that out there, is the paper.
Mhm.
So I think that's what I see as not being in a small town anymore. What I miss is being a part of a small local community that feels like they can be a change where they are.
And where your voice can be heard.
Totally.
Thank you. Sara, comments from Ambrose?
These were jumping back to the previous
Yeah,
questions.
that's okay.
But he said, I think what Susan was saying previously is that forums have really helped, and that they have one coming up on March 5th at the Presbyterian Church. It'll be on healthcare, which is a huge issue. He did say, they say in the news business, it's like church and state, the news and economics part of it. So I can't really answer questions on the economics, but the forums have been a real help for the paper. And Andrew also commented that Dime Bank signed on as the presenting sponsor for the next forum. It looks like they just signed on today. So
Great. Good news. So what can communities do to keep their local papers vital and viable and reliable news sources? And Ambrose and would love to hear from you on this. And Susan, Jake, and Sara. I mean, there's no magic. Obviously, money has to come in, subscriptions have to be there, ad revenue. But aside from that, from the obvious, what can the average person do to keep their paper vital and publishing? Jake?
I think more than anything, to read it, and um, the paper will know, if people will know who at the paper if there are eyeballs on it, whether you're reading it on the paper, in print, or online. Um, and um, I think if there's a way for you to do so, to engage, to write a letter to the editor, or if there's um, something that you think that the community should know about, to let someone at the paper know. And if there's a reason to do it, and you think it makes sense to place an ad in the paper, and to do what you can to support it. Because I remember I asked my professor, who is my academic advisor in journalism school, what is the sales pitch when you're going for a local paper in well, 2025, now 2026? If you're going out to sell advertising, he said, well, part of it at this point is philanthropic. It's like, for this community to thrive and be healthy, it needs a healthy and thriving newspaper, and you're part of the community, and you owe that to the community.
Interesting. Sara Garcia, you had a comment from Ambrose?
he said, yeah, he said, of course it's subscriptions. If the people believe in the newspaper, believe in it, and want it, they should subscribe. Often people don't realize that newspapers are a business, and you do need money to run a business. Also, letting other people know about the newspaper and asking friends and neighbors, are you subscribing? He said, we work hard with local businesses to get them to advertise the paper. If you believe in it, you should pay for it to help us keep it rolling. Andrew also commented in the chat and said the community responded, but as importantly, our staff responded. They've been incredible and are so very talented, and we're very grateful.
Great. Susan, what can the community do to keep their papers strong and viable?
I guess it's more of the same. It's the subscriptions and the advertising, and a sense that it's an investment in themselves, in Shelter Island itself as a community. There was a comment in one of Jake's podcasts. He interviewed Cliff Clark, and it was clear. He said you can't say there's exactly a return on investment to advertise in the paper, but what you're doing is supporting your community by putting your ferry information out there. You're supporting the paper. It's very symbiotic. We all are helping each other. So if people think about it, think they have something that they could share in terms of putting an ad in the paper, I think we do have staff who will help them with that, who design ads. And then if they have an idea for a story, we're all open to it. So the more people feel invested in what they're going to learn about, the more likely they are to keep subscribing. I hope that we have enough outlets selling our paper. We have to make sure people can actually pick it up and find it and read it.
Great. Any more, Sara Garcia, was there anything else from Ambrose there or,
I
okay.
can also add to something.
Yep.
Sorry,
Yep.
I'll go. As a business owner, that is a sort of a constant struggle right now, is figuring out where 20 years ago you could put an ad in the yellow pages and that would be enough, right? And now you're competing with algorithms and social media and, fake news or whatever you want to call it. Like, you have to sort of figure out what's happening, where eyes are. And so that is something that I've seen, especially here, even in a big city, local businesses who participate in the trends, they're the ones who are getting the eyes, so that those subscribers and the readership, I think good sentiment will only go so far, and nostalgia will only last for so many generations until people are like, well, that wasn't my upbringing, so why should it matter? So I think there is an element of, I even think of word on the street, how easily that could be done on a social media, page, just to sort of boost or to increase what's already happening on the island, to sort of have a voice in a different way. That's where my generation is. That's where my clients are. They're on their phones at night scrolling. They're not sitting around the kitchen table anymore with their families on Saturday morning reading the paper. So generations have shifted, and we as business owners, we figure that out or we fold.
Yep. Great. Sara Garcia?
Yep. Ambrose was adding one thing after what Susan was saying. After the police blotter, the letters page is the most read part of the newspaper. The police blotter is most read because people want to know what's going on. But write us a letter. Let us know the issues that affect you in the community. That helps create a dialogue and helps keep the newspaper viable.
Great. So, Jake, so many of the episodes of the podcast were sobering, to say the least. But episode 9 ends on a very hopeful note with the emergence of some stories about some Gen Z folks who are committed to community journalism and but are doing it in slightly different ways and putting their own stamp on it. And Susan, you made reference to your great sports reporter, Jackson. So Jake, can you talk a little bit about what's happening with the younger generation and how they're recasting and reframing community news?
I'll try my best, given that I'm not a part of that
No, but and
generation.
also if you could address the kids out in Montauk.
Yes. I came across them because they were featured in the New York Times. This group of high schoolers in Montauk who have a now, I guess it would be going into its third year, called the Ditch Weekly, which is a weekly summer pop newsprint only publication that they put out during the summer in Montauk. And what they said is um, they try their best to write about things that kids their age care about. And so high schoolers don't care as much about, the town board, although that's something that you have to do, so much as like sports and other issues that affect them. I think that they write in a different way. Um, the other thing he said about the Ditch Weekly was that they try to make it a lot more colorful and to do other things that to engage their readership. I think that more than anything else, it was they want they want to write about the things that they themselves care about, and in turn, they think that their readership will care about them as well.
Great. Susan, you had mentioned your great sports reporter earlier.
Yes, he's amazing. Jackson Rohrer, he's a junior in Shelter Island High School, and he is our official sports writer. He's been featured in Jake's podcasts, and we all look for hope every day, but I do find it very encouraging that somebody is interested in writing, in putting events into some kind of sense by writing. And we've had a couple of other interns reach out to us and do a great job for us, and we have some applying for us going forward. So I don't think that they've kind of given up on the idea of a newspaper. What I think they will do is keep the newspaper and add on, just as we've added on podcasts, and they will come up with ideas. But I think um, there's hope that people of their age really think that it's valuable to see, hey, to see a byline. I would like to be a writer for the Shelter Island Reporter. That's a pretty cool thing for a young person to think. So I do find a lot of hope there, and certainly impressed with the talent and the ability we see there,
He
especially.
is also isn't he the editor of the Inlet, the school paper?
That's right. The school
Yep.
newspaper in the Shelter
Which
Island
is-
School is the
yeah,
Inlet. So, yeah, he's our wonder kid.
Yes, he's great. Okay, so it's a few minutes after 5. We've been going at this for a solid hour. There, I think, are a number, Sarah Garcia, a number of comments and questions that have come up. So if you could relay those,
Yeah.
would be terrific.
Absolutely. We've got our first question, which is what kinds of resources are available to give local papers solutions to the assault of social media advertising?
Jake, Andrew, Susan, Sarah?
I think that was my dad. I think he had a question.
That sounds like a dad question.
Yeah.
Any answer for him?
I mean, I'm on social media a lot just because that's the nature of my business. And I think like what I have seen, people have been really responding to lightheartedness, joy, personal stories. And so I think anything that the reporter can do to even just capitalize on sort of the sweet hometown charm and adding that to social media, and then just, putting a sign up at the bottom to buy the local reporter, or even, what the biggest thing right now is charitable donations. People love doing that. So even saying something like buy this for someone in our community who can't afford it, our generation jumps on that because people want to feel like they make an impact. So I think instead of feeling intimidated or afraid of social media, we have to figure out how can you get that same charm and community feeling through social media, because it's not going anywhere.
Great. Jake, anything to add?
That this was something that Jackson, who I really enjoyed speaking with, talked about. One of the things he said is that he sees his classmates reading stuff, whether it's about sports or about people in their family or friends. And he said if you ask them if they're reading the news, they would say no, just because they see it in a completely different way. But they are reading it. Um, it's we have to figure out how to reach them in a way that will engage them. And I think it's subject matter, but it's also the medium in which we choose. So I think that uh, the newspaper industry in general sort of um, when Google and came along didn't respond very well and kind of ended up behind the technology. I think we have to, rather than trying to say, well, we're going to do this because this is the way we've always done it. We have to embrace these new technologies and new forms of media and podcasts, videos, putting them on Instagram, Facebook, wherever. I think you just have to reimagine how we can, meet people where they are, because there's now they're you have to go to so many more places in order to find them, and to find them in a completely different manner depending on where.
Okay. Sarah?
I've got a couple statements from Andrew in the
Great.
chat. He said that we're leveraging social to grow our audience and said it's difficult to hire journalists, and I'm cautious on adding to our cost structure during the winter. The ad has led to new freelance relationships that will allow us to make a hire at some point in the future. And that's from Andrew.
Great. Other questions?
We did have a question / very kind comment, which said the reporter is not only vital, but a weekly source of joy. The news coverage, the profiles, the columnists, the Peter Waldner cartoon worthy of national syndication. I'm among so many residents who are grateful to you for keeping it going. My question is, how stable is the future now? It's been hard not to notice for weeks or months that there's been an ad in the paper for a staff reporter for the Times Review, which Andrew addressed. Does that say anything we should know?
Okay. Ambrose, Susan, Jake, I mean, that was one of my questions as well, is we did get kind of a stay of execution. That the reporter was taken off the block. The lights just went out again. But how sustainable and long-term do we think that is?
I can't
Sarah?
speak. I can't speak to the reporter specifically, but I think um, it's difficult because you see that you can people can see quite clearly that you know being a reporter is not a way to earn a ton of money. It's like if you have those skills, you can earn a lot more with a lot less stress elsewhere. And
But you
it's
wouldn't be a hometown,
no,
uh,
you wouldn't.
you wouldn't be a
So
hometown
there,
face.
I mean, you might look at it as a calling, to be a reporter for a local newspaper. But there's also like the problem of, where can you, with the cost of housing rising, where can you afford to live on like the salaries that a newspaper can afford to pay you?
Sarah, there was just a comment that popped up from Andrew.
Yep, he said, I'm investing in making this business work and thrive, like securing the Dime sponsorship today.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's a great note on which to end. Susan, Jake, Sarah, thank you, and Ambrose, thank you so much for doing this on a Friday, cold Friday afternoon. Sarah, how cold is it up there in Winnipeg?
We've just come out of a very cold stint. We had a wind chill. This is in Celsius, minus 48.
I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah, but I know this is really cold for Shelter Island.
It is.
It's not the same.
No. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you, all the participants, so the people who watched. This has been great fun. And Jake, thank you for doing this. It was really marvelous, and it truly was a love letter to community papers, and just a great kind of a walk down memory lane in parts for the reporter. And thank you all.
Thanks, Joanne.
Have a good
Thank you,
weekend.
Joanne.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.